And a quick look at the dailies. If you missed at the top of the hour, this is what is on the front page of the Daily Nation this morning. It's all about the 18% wage rise. Uhuru woos workers with 18% salary raise. Besides increasing minimum wage of the lowest paid employees, President also raises non-taxable bonuses and overtime packs to 100,000 shillings as huge as he urges, I should say, Kenyans to give him a second term. 9 to 11 is a page that the story is tucked away. Also, State extends free zone recruitment of domestic employees by Middle East nations. And NASA chiefs head for poll strategy talks. The National Super Alliance co-principals will today start a two-day retreat at the coast to craft a campaign strategy and program in readiness for the August elections. That story continues on page 4 of the Daily Nation. Today, lucky Kenyan wins 220 million shilling sports spacer bet. A Kenyan has won 221 million shillings on a sports spacer jackpot, an amount that could enable him to foot the construction of Kenya Sports Academy as allocated by the Treasury and still have 21 million shillings change. The Standard is carrying this particular headlining story for you. What Uhuru's pay deal means, 18% award. It says President raises minimum wage, pleases low-paid cadre, but sends the private sector already in recession over poor economic conditions and high production costs into shock. That is what we have on page 4 and 5 of the Standard. My smart screen is losing memory here, so I won't touch it. Court ruling is recipe for disaster. This is what Chebukati is saying. IBC says all systems are in place to ensure a smooth election. IBC chairman warns against decision that presidential results announced at constituency level are final, says they have appealed, and that story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star. And I want to pick the legal mind of Joshua Kiptoo to tell us more about this particular headlining story of the Star. What do you think about this particular court ruling where the chair is saying that it's a disaster? IBC chairman warns against decision that the presidential results announced at constituency level are final, says they have appealed.
I think the court, in fact, was not making anything new. It was just affirming what the Political Parties Act provides for, the Elections Act provides for, Constitution provides, that when it comes to the presidential election tally, the final results are the ones signed by the returning officer at the constituency. I think the difference has been, it just affirmed that that should be considered to be final. I will take you back to the Supreme Court dispute, the presidential Supreme Court dispute of 2013. One of the considerations was the issue of announcing. If you remember CORD's petition, part of their petition was that according to their presentation, manipulation would occur between the constituency and the national tally. And I think this practice started with 2007. I don't know if you remember 2007. The main bone of contention at that time was in 2007, an RO would announce a result and the party agents would communicate the same to the parties, whatever, to their respective parties. But when it is announced at the national tally, that may be different. In fact, the genesis of this, which was even captured by the Kriegler Commission, was at some point the by then ECK chair, Kivuitu, complaining even on camera, saying that I am not able to talk to my returning officers. I can't assess them. That was the genesis. So the Kriegler Commission ended up recommending that when it comes to announcement of results, that the ones at the constituency level. So the court only affirmed more or less like a practice. But you would understand why the IBC chair is a bit concerned. I don't know if you noted for the party primaries, there was a mismatch between two things. You would find like one bizarre incident in Kisumu. The county returning officer was issuing a certificate to one of the candidates, while the deputy returning officer was issuing a different certificate to a different candidate. And at the same time, the third candidate contended that they were still counting in other polling centers. So Chebukati comes with this practical aspect that do we have a guarantee that the ROs will have fidelity to the law? They will announce what can be verified and be given to be the final at the national tally. And that is why you remember the opposition coming up powerfully and say they will have their parallel tallying. So I would understand the fears of the IBC chair because, again, it goes to the political culture. You never know. Or the fear. I think the only problem is he's the chair of the commission and he's already expressing, in fact, in a way, he's expressing his lack of confidence in his ROs. Because at the end of the day, he's saying, I'm not so sure the ROs would be consistent. And again, you know how our political terrain is divided. We have each party having its stronghold. What guarantees do you have, for example, in the Jubilee-dominated areas that the ROs would be willing to competently announce, for example, would they be so happy to announce how the opposition has won, for example, even in the battleground kind of county? So you would understand the concern of the IBC chair, but it is proper, it is right, it is within the law. The court only affirmed what is already provided there. Right. So it's a question of practicability. As long as there is no room for manipulation, as long as the ROs would stick to the law, and then the political parties with their respective agents, because as I said, an election is a process, and the political parties and the players are the most important. The political leaders, they have agents, we have observers. If the whole team can be there when the announcement can be done, then I don't foresee a problem that Chebukati is referring to.
All right, but are we setting up also ourselves for a very, dodgy ground to walk on when we have the parallel tallying as well? We saw this happening in Kisumu. Very confusing. And this is what also ODM is really fronting for all the NASA coalition. Or ODM, I should say. They're having a parallel tallying system in itself. Right? Let's say from Wamatangi, briefly.
You see, Debarl, I concur largely with what Wakili is saying. Definitely. That's the way the law is. And indeed, interpreted correctly and in goodwill, with goodwill. That's the way it should be. But then a few scenarios, and Chebukati's concern should be treated as a very serious concern. One, see, even during the primaries themselves, we would go, you conduct your elections, and the presiding officer at the polling station announces your results.
Yes.
And then those results are taken over by your agents, and again to the returning officer. The returning officer again will be able to announce your results after telling.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, and for example, if you use my case as an example, while I knew the results at the polling station level, while I knew the results at the constituency level, I had still to wait. I had still to wait for the county returning officer himself to confirm those particular results. Yes. Otherwise, I would have gone ahead myself and declared myself the winner early. Actually, even as those disputes arose, my results had been announced early in the morning from every polling station, actually at every constituency level. Now, when you look at the presidential election, and let's remember, for example, there was a scenario in 2007, 2008, when some returning officers actually, and some polling presiding officers were unable to access polling stations. Remember, there was a case in Kericho where people went and blocked the road between Sotik and Kericho town, and they were saying, you cannot pass here. Come first alight. Let us see who is in the vehicle. What ethnic background do they come from? What kind of results are they going to be producing?
Yes.
And so, if you are saying, for example, in a case like this where you say that the results announced at the constituency level is the final result, and it is not subject to any announcement or any ratification at the national level, at the National Tallying Center, then what he's saying could be right. It can be a recipe for chaos, because then you're going to have how many claimants to this? Everybody will come with their tally. You must have somebody there who is given that mandate to be able to make the final pronouncement and say, with the words of this person at the national level, this is going to be the final result. But otherwise, we are going to have a lot of chaos.
All right, let's say from Mithika and Linturi, we'll come to you.
I think it's important to understand the background or the wisdom of the legislators in passing this particular law, because it's very necessary for everyone now to understand why the law is crafted or is as it is.
Yes.
And Debarl, what we are trying to cure is, or the mischief that we are trying to address here, was the fact that, for example, and I would want to give examples using the presidential election and the other local election, for example.
Yes.
So, for presidential elections, the returning officer or the results announced at the constituency level are supposed to be final. And it is expected that the returning officers will have looked or checked the results coming from all the polling stations within that particular constituency, did their tally, and came up with the total for that particular constituency, which you would announce, and that will be the last or final resort. Meaning that there is no way that those results will change in whatever circumstances when we come to looking at the national tally from all the other constituencies in the country. That was the thinking. Number two, when you also look at why the polling center or the polling station or the presiding officer would announce the results of either the governor at that polling station or the member of parliament at that polling station was to avoid the possibility of the agents or anybody else coming up or cooking up figures on different results from what was announced at that particular polling center. So any money that is there, the information that is announced or the figures given by the presiding officer are supposed to be final. Because remember, even when you look at the person vested with the power to announce results that are reliable and that are expected to be the last result, at the polling station is either presiding officer, and at the counties, as the sub-counties, is the sub-county returning officers. So I think this is what people need to address, and whatever the fears that Chebukati may have, in my view, are unfounded. Right. They are not necessary. Right. They are not necessary unless he also wants to keep us in a mood to make us speculate that we want to create a room to imagine anything other than what has been announced in those particular areas can be changed. So
you think the fears of Chebukati, they are unfounded as to what Mithika Linturi is saying?
In my opinion, they are absolutely unfounded. You see, the whole idea that this thing should be announced at the constituency level is to try and cure any possibility of a mischief between the constituency and the National Tallying Center.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened last time. That's exactly what happened last time. And this process is going to be so transparent that every ordinary Kenyan will be able to calculate these things for themselves. All the agents are there. Yeah. All what you call, everybody's there. These forms are going to be signed by the agents. And when they get them from all the wards, they bring them from the wards. The MP is there watching his votes. The MCA is there watching his votes.
Yes.
And the presidential votes are also watched in the maximum way at that level. So once you say this is now, for example, Lagdera, and you send your staff in Lagdera, these things are going to come not at one go. They come, they trickle. They come one at a time. And we keep on getting the announcement. So every Kenyan will be able to follow the same way you follow other developed first world nations when they're getting these figures. You see, a state or a constituency announces, you can see who is losing and who is winning.
Yes.
And it is very transparent. Why would the chairman of IEBC want a situation in which these numbers are sent to him, and then the possibility of that mischief cooking? You know, that's the word Kiambu used. That some people are cooking some numbers somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened in 2007. They cooked the numbers, altered the numbers. The poor guy had no control over it, but he paid the price for it. He was blamed for it. And that's exactly why the Kriegler Commission came up with all these things. And that's why we have this piece of legislation in place. The regulations ran contrary to the legislation. So in my opinion, Chebukati had better come very clean on this thing, because then it worries everybody else when the chairman comes out into the open and says he does not want that transparency. He does not want that what you call decentralization. The whole idea of the decentralization is that we can all follow the numbers. Every Kenyan can follow the numbers and everybody can protect those numbers. But when you centralize and put everything into one basket and decide it's only the chairman who is here, who is going to determine who has won and who has lost, and then they do all the cookings in the process, then that is what marks of a system that would be flawed.
All right, thank you.
Maybe just to add.
And for the issue, let me just finish this. For the issue of the parallel tallying, it's not an ODM thing.
Everybody.
It is a NASA thing. It's a NASA thing. It's a NASA thing.
All right.
We will have that parallel. And that's exactly what Chebukati said. I have no problem with it, provided you don't announce, because constitutionally, it's my responsibility to announce the winners. But we can announce the numbers. By the way, let me tell you. We can announce the numbers, which means Those numbers will all be announced. We'll tally the 290 constituencies together and tell Kenyans this is how the numbers look like.
Let's hear from Kiptoo.
Maybe just to add on that, in fact, I think the best practice is whereby for the IBC chair, it should even go to the extent that the results will be posted outside the polling station in terms of, they have voted, agents have signed, post them out there. And when it comes to elections, information always creates crisis. Every time we have our general election, even in 2013, despite having a new IBC, what time did it take us to get the final results? How long did it take us as a country to know who the next president would be? So that kind of information, whatever misflow, comes from the fact that the time it takes for one to get the results from a polling center to the constituency level and then to the county, because we also have those different levels. So the whole idea is we try minimize, in fact, tension, because if, for example, we are seated here, all political parties are aware that from this constituency, however far-flung it is, these are the numbers, they have already been announced. Whatever we'll be waiting for from the national will be just a confirmation. And in this way, it also acts as a check and balance. Don't forget the issue of a check and balance in the sense that if a result has been announced at the constituency level, there is no room, therefore, for you to have a case whereby at the national that is changed. And in fact, we end up even reducing possibilities of manipulation. In fact, at the end of the day, it will be very difficult for a party to contest and say that these results have been manipulated, because we will remind them, why your agents not there when this was announced at the constituency, at the county, and they were signed by all your party agents?
At the wards, actually.
Yeah. So make them open, in fact, open the process. An election, in fact, in the West, how comes in the US, the elections close, and in 3-4 hours, the results already in?
Thank you.
So we should, in fact, we should encourage and cultivate that openness.
Very briefly.
I think largely we are saying one and the same thing. But finally, we all must admit, an electoral process is an extremely competitive process with a lot of self-vested interest. And it is very rare. Look at what has happened now after the elections, after the primaries. We've just been citing how many cases have been filed in both tribunals, both at NASA, ODM, and at Jubilee. Hundreds, if not thousands. So ask yourself, what will be happening in a national election itself, a national general election? And that is why it is true, it is constitutional, actually, that the result announced at the polling station is the final result of an election. But there has to be somebody there who will confirm that this is the final result. Otherwise, if you leave it to every polling officer in all the thousands of polling stations, every person will come with their own result and say, I won, tally this, tally that. Somebody must be there. Just the way, even after you go through your education, you have all your questionnaires, you have your test marked by various teachers, but at the end of the day, when you go to collect your certificate, it is the principal who will sign your certificate and say, yes, you are here. Yeah, that's how it should be. All right.